Welcome to another episode of our video series of the mechanics of human cognition.
It's good to be back. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. I was trying to organize a simple get-together this weekend, and I was just overwhelmed. The number of apps, the notifications, just to get two families in the same place.
I know that feeling. It's a perfect example of what we're talking about today, isn't it?
It really is. It's this paradox. We build all this technology to liberate ourselves, but it ends up feeling like a kind of subtle control system.
That feeling, that anxiety you felt, that's the signal. It's a sign that something is deeply misaligned. And our mission today is to analyze exactly why this modern world feels so incompatible with our, let's call them human factory settings.
Right. We have to go beyond just saying, oh, my phone is distracting.
Yeah.
We need to understand the cognitive mechanics at play, how these tools are, in effect, managing us.
Let's start with the scale of it, the mismatch. I mean, we are creatures with a profound history.
At least 300,000 years of anatomically modern humans.
Built on 3.5 billion years of evolution. Our entire biology is optimized for a certain kind of world, a world of struggle, movement, and unpredictability.
And then in what is basically a geological blink of an eye, the last 200 years, but really the last 50.
We completely rewrote the rules. We changed not just our physical environment, but our entire informational and social landscape. We built this world for convenience.
But in doing so, we made a huge oversight. We created a setting that just doesn't respect our own biological and psychological nature.
It's the ultimate irony. Everything designed for our comfort, for our ease, actually risks stunting our development. We've sanded away all the necessary friction that made us resilient.
You think about the word technology itself, the root, Techne.
It means skill, ability. Historically, technology was born from pure necessity.
Like Homo habilis picking up a stone to use as a hammer.
Exactly. It was a survival tool. We were physically vulnerable. We needed tools to amplify our abilities against a dangerous world.
And a key point here is that those tools were passive. A hammer doesn't do anything until you pick it up. It required your intent, your effort.
That relationship has completely flipped, and that's the dividing line. For the first time in human history, we have created technologies that are not passive.
They're active agents.
They're intelligent, and they are optimized for one thing, maximizing our engagement, which of course really means maximizing data extraction. They actively demand our time. They are not waiting for us to use them. They are actively trying to use us.
And when we talk about being used or controlled, I think many people still picture that old Orwellian 1984 model.
The state watching every individual.
Right. But what our analysis shows is that the real system is far more subtle and maybe more powerful.
Oh, absolutely. The system isn't that interested in you as an individual unless you're, doing something illegal. The real power comes from the collective.
From the anonymized behavioral data.
Precisely. It's all about grouping, predicting, and then manipulating behavior, but at an industrial scale.
And this is where that term anonymized data is so important. When you click agree, your personal name might get stripped away, but the pattern, your clicks, your scrolls, your purchases, all of it feeds the algorithm.
Billions of data points. The AI isn't trained to find out who you are. It's trained to forecast what people like you will do next. And these groups are incredibly specific.
To the point where the system can predict our interests, sometimes better than we can ourselves.
We see these massive coordinated behavioral shifts that are clearly driven by algorithms. The air fryer phenomenon is a perfect example.
It really is. It wasn't a tool for survival. It didn't solve some desperate, urgent problem.
No, but suddenly, in a completely saturated market of kitchen gadgets, millions of people all at once felt an immediate vital need for this one specific appliance.
The algorithm found that sweet spot, the desire for convenience, plus that sort of psychological nod to healthy cooking, and then the content push began.
Sponsored posts, targeted ads, recipe videos everywhere. A system-driven reality was created where you felt you were falling behind if you didn't have one.
And the research shows just how effective this is. That through these curated information streams, algorithms can measurably alter our core beliefs, our tastes, even our political leanings.
And in a frighteningly short amount of time, we're talking within 6 months, this isn't just about selling a product, it's about shaping the user's reality.
So if our choices are being predicted and, to some extent, managed, if we're being collectively nudged into certain behaviors, we have to ask, isn't this already a new kind of technological control?
We might feel free because there are no physical chains, but the mental and behavioral constraints are tighter than ever. Real autonomy requires the ability to opt out.
Which brings us to what you've called the addiction test, the ultimate stress test for our modern freedom.
I encourage you, try this for yourself. Just try to disconnect your phone and internet for one normal 24-hour period.
Not on vacation where you're already primed to disconnect.
No, on a busy Tuesday. For most people, that experiment brings on a kind of genuine panic, and often it ends in failure.
The dependency is it's startling. I mean, for many of us, losing internet for a day is more disabling than losing natural gas. It stops everything: planning, banking, work.
And if you can't stop doing something without severe impairment or anxiety, well, by most clinical definitions, that points to dependence, to addiction.
So when we can't refuse the connection, the illusion of freedom starts to crumble.
And we start to see the gears of our own functional enslavement.
Okay, so let's pull back the curtain on that mechanism. Let's move from the social problem to the cognitive vulnerability it exploits. This is rooted deep in our biology.
It is. The foundation is what we call the search drive. Every living thing is driven by curiosity, by the need to survey its environment for opportunity or danger.
Is there food? A potential mate? Is there a threat?
And this whole process is fueled by two things: uncertainty and expectation.
Expectation is the engine. And when that expectation is met, you find the food, or in our world, you find a really interesting post. The brain releases dopamine.
Right. And dopamine is so often misunderstood. It's not the pleasure chemical, it's more like the seeking or concentration chemical.
It tells your brain, pay attention. Whatever you just did, do that again.
Exactly. It reinforces the successful behavior. But here's the critical part. What happens if the reward is always there? If you know with 100% certainty that food is in the same spot every time,
The seeking behavior stops.
it drops off a cliff. The brain is an efficiency machine. Once you have certainty, the dopamine reward plummets. Why waste energy looking?
So the key finding is that the brain releases the most dopamine and creates the most engagement when the reward is variable.
The gambling factor.
Yes, the research is very clear on this. The peak engagement, the maximum neurological push, happens at roughly a 50% success rate and a 50% failure rate.
That uncertainty is what maximizes the drive. It makes you want to try just one more time. If it's a guarantee, you get bored. If it's impossible, you give up. But if it's 50-50, you're hooked.
And the connection to our technology is it's devastatingly obvious.
The infinite scroll, the refresh button, every swipe and surprise feature on every major app. There are perfectly engineered 50-50 casino mechanisms.
We scroll because of what you'd call existential boredom, that innate need to search for something engaging.
And the system feeds you just enough dull content, the 50% failure mixed in with something highly relevant or emotionally stimulating, the 50% success.
So you're always chasing the next hit, the next variable reward. And the tool itself is designed to exploit that exact biological loop.
We are the only species on Earth that has manufactured industrial-scale tools to create addiction in ourselves by targeting this precise neurological mechanism.
That thought alone should make us all pause. We've literally automated our own vulnerability. And the consequence of this is a kind of atrophy of our own agency.
If the brain is just constantly being fed this ready-made, perfectly personalized content that has already done the searching for us, what happens to our ability to generate our own ideas?
We become functionally unemployed.
That's a great way to put it. We are designed for complex problem solving, for struggle. Historically, that was survival, finding food, building shelter. Modern life, for all its safety, shields us from that necessary friction.
So our brains are off the clock, but they're still wired to solve problems, which leads to this deep existential crisis. We're searching for meaning, but without the necessary struggle to create it.
And if that search is just satisfied by passively consuming content, the creativity muscle just withers. The consumption brain takes over and the generative brain shrinks.
This also applies to how we view creative tools, like AI. People think it's a shortcut to creativity, but the sources are clear. It's a force multiplier, but only if you already have a strong foundation.
Correct. Technology amplifies competence. It doesn't solve ignorance. To get something truly novel out of an advanced AI, I need years of my own struggle with a topic to even know the right specific, nuanced question to ask.
So if I just ask a generic question because I haven't done the work,
you get a generic stock answer, the same boring output everyone else gets.
But if I ask a question that could only be formulated from my unique experience and deep knowledge, then the AI can give me a novel insight that only I was capable of finding.
The technology has to be an instrument for your agenda, not the agenda itself. If you're using it to realize a deep personal vision, it's a tool. If you're just passively using it to get easy validation, There's no real cognitive growth.
So, we've established the problem. We're dependent. The system is designed to exploit us. What, then, is the most revolutionary thing an individual can do?
Well, regulation is certainly needed. Widespread AI adoption is a bit like giving flamethrowers to children, but the most critical step is individual. It's self-awareness. In Turkish, we have a word for this, bilinçlenme.
Bilinçlenme, tell us about that.
It's a concept that means something like coming to consciousness or enlightenment. It's about gaining a critical understanding of the forces that are acting on you. The digital system's bug, its vulnerability, is that it demands constant rhythm and speed from us.
It keeps us moving too fast to think.
Yes. And the moment you achieve bilinçlenme, you see that weakness. And so the counteraction is profound in its simplicity.
Stop.
Just stop. The most revolutionary act you can perform is to resist the speed, to move at your own pace according to your own internal agenda, to intentionally slow down.
And if the algorithm wants to keep us in a bubble, the counteraction is to actively seek out friction.
Exactly. Intentionally connect with ideas and people that challenge you. People who are outside the algorithm's predictable grid. You have to actively seek out the intellectual struggle the system wants to shield you from.
That becomes the daily test of freedom then. Not about throwing the phone away, but mastering it.
And you can test yourself constantly. If you pick up your phone to do one specific thing, check the weather, and 5 minutes later you find yourself scrolling, the device is using you. It won.
But if you can do the task and immediately put the phone down,
then you are free. You have retained your agency. That simple act is the difference between using a tool and being used by one.
that really is the fundamental frame we need. Technology must always be an instrument, never the aim.
And we have to prioritize developing our character, our personality, our resilience. That's more important than just collecting information or diplomas. That internal maturity is the only real defense we have.
So a final thought for people to consider. If the new generation is raised without this necessary cognitive friction, if they rely solely on the easy, entertaining dopamine loop of the variable reward cycle, what happens to their competence in the long run?
They really need to ask themselves, where will I be in 20 years? Without having wrestled with deep reading, with difficult ideas, with challenging conversations, the capacity for originality and resilience will be, I think, profoundly diminished. They risk becoming expert consumers in a world that is crying out for creative, generalist thinkers. And that is the true hidden cost of all this engineered comfort.